She was adjusting her earrings in the hallway mirror when she told me, like she was mentioning the weather. "I'm going to dinner with someone tonight." I looked up from my laptop. "A date?" She didn't flinch. "Yes, I think it's time you just accepted that." I set the laptop down slowly, folded my hands, and said one word. "Okay." She blinked, waiting for the argument she'd clearly rehearsed for. It never came. She grabbed her keys and left, and I sat there in the quiet, already knowing something she didn't. I'd stopped being surprised by her a long time ago, and I'd already started preparing for this exact night. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 41, an actuary at a mid-size insurance firm in Charlotte, married to Priya for 9 years. We have no kids, which, looking back, might be the only thing that made what came next simple instead of devastating. Priya works in pharmaceutical sales, travels 3 weeks a month, and for the last year had been closer with her regional director Mark than any wife needed to be with a coworker. I'd noticed the pattern quietly: late replies to texts, a perfume I didn't recognize, a laugh on the phone that used to be reserved for me. I never confronted her. I watched instead. Why didn't I fight for my marriage that night, the way she expected me to? Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd already met with a lawyer. I'd stayed quiet for months, not out of weakness, but because I know how people behave when they think no one is watching. Priya had grown up the favorite in a family where her older sister got blamed for everything, and she got excused for anything, and she carried that into our marriage. The assumption that whatever she did, I would absorb it and stay. I let her believe that a little longer than I should have. It gave me time to gather what I needed before she gave me a reason to need it. By midnight, the house looked untouched, but everything had changed. I packed one suitcase, documents, laptop, a few photographs, and left the rest exactly where it was. On the kitchen table, I placed my wedding ring next to a short note. "I accept your decision. I hope you can accept mine. My attorney will be in touch." Then I drove to my brother Elliot's place and turned my phone face down. At 1:40 a.m., it started buzzing. 7 missed calls, then texts. "Where are you? Why is your ring on the table? Daniel, answer me." I read every one and didn't respond, because there was nothing left unsaid that hadn't already been said the moment she told me to accept it. The next morning, sitting in my attorney Nora Castellano's office signing separation paperwork, my phone lit up again. I came home to an empty house, not an argument. I locked the screen without a reply. Nora slid a folder across the table, the one I'd asked her to prepare weeks earlier when I first suspected where things were heading. Joint accounts, the property title, a prenup neither of us had touched in 9 years, one clause of which Priya had clearly forgotten existed. That afternoon she reached me through Elliot's phone, her voice cracking. "I never thought you'd actually leave." I said, "That's exactly the problem." She said she'd canceled the dinner after walking out the door, as if that erased anything. I told her canceling it didn't change that she'd been willing to go in the first place. The line went quiet, and in that silence I heard something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, but calculation. She was already thinking about what she'd lose. She should have been thinking harder. 2 days later, Nora called me with something that turned this from a quiet separation into something else entirely. The joint business account we'd opened 3 years earlier, seeded with money from my mother's inheritance, to help Priya start a side consulting practice, had a withdrawal history Nora wanted me to see. $41,000 had moved out over 18 months, in amounts just under $5,000 at a time, small enough to avoid the alerts we'd set up together. All authorized under my digital signature. I had never once logged into that account from my phone in the last year. Someone else had. I asked Nora to trace it before I said a word to anyone. It took 4 days. The transfers went to a shared account under Priya's name and Mark's, the same regional director from her dinner that night. Further back, Nora found an email, forwarded accidentally to my old work address by an assistant who didn't realize whose inbox it belonged to, outlining a plan for Mark to leave his own marriage once his consulting firm with Priya was stable, and for Priya to walk away from ours with the business intact and half our marital assets, timed to close right before his company's year-end review, where a financial affair with a subordinate would have ended his career. I didn't call her, I didn't confront her, I let her keep believing the divorce was simply about a bruised marriage. I forwarded everything to Nora, and to a forensic accountant named Priya didn't know existed, a woman named Susan Achebe who had helped my firm with fraud audits before. Susan confirmed within a week that the withdrawals matched a pattern designed to stay under audit thresholds, and that the business Priya was building had, from day one, been funded by money that was never legally hers alone to move. A week after the okay night, Priya asked to meet at a cafe near our old apartment to talk like adults about the settlement. She arrived early, tired in a way I'd never seen, and slid my wedding ring across the table like she expected me to take it back. "I kept hoping you'd ask for this," she said. "I didn't touch it. That ring meant something once. The metal was never the point." She started explaining herself, how she'd never meant for it to go this far, how Mark made her feel seen in a way I hadn't in years, how she'd been unhappy long before any of this started. I let her talk. I let her build the entire explanation for herself, the one she'd tell her family, her friends, maybe even herself for years. Then I set a single printed page on the table between our coffee cups. It was the withdrawal ledger, $41,000, dated and itemized, next to the forwarded email, with Mark's name in the subject line. She went still. "Where did you get this?" "You told me to accept your decision," I said, keeping my voice level. "I did. This isn't about the dinner, Priya. It's about my mother's money funding a business you built with a man who was planning to leave his own marriage the moment yours was legally over." Her face lost whatever composure she'd walked in with. She reached for the page and I slid it back into my folder. "Nora already has copies. So does Susan. So does your firm's compliance office, since apparently a company officer having a shared undisclosed account with a direct report is something HR takes seriously." She didn't cry the way I expected. She went quiet, which told me more than tears would have. 3 weeks later, Mark was placed on leave pending an internal review, and resigned before it concluded. His marriage ended anyway, just not on his terms. The consulting business Priya had planned to keep folded before it opened, once she couldn't produce a clean accounting of its funding. In the divorce settlement, the $41,000 was recognized as premarital inheritance, improperly commingled and withdrawn without consent, and the court adjusted the split accordingly. She got less than she would have gotten if she'd simply asked me for a divorce honestly. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her to tell her what happened to Mark or the business. I let the paperwork speak, the way it always does when you've done the quiet work of documenting the truth instead of shouting about it. Months later, the divorce was finalized without a single raised voice in any room it happened in. People who knew us expected a messier story, something with slammed doors and screaming matches. What actually happened was smaller and, I think, more permanent. She asked me to accept her choice, and I did, completely, all the way down to the parts she hadn't told me about yet. Self-respect was never about proving her wrong in the moment. It was about making sure that whatever she decided to do next, she'd have to do it in the light, not the dark she assumed I wasn't watching. I think about that night sometimes, not with anger, but with something quieter, something closer to peace. She wanted a reaction. I gave her a folder instead. And now I sleep fine. If someone you love told you to just accept their choice, would you have argued that night, or would you have done exactly what I did, and let the truth make the argument for you later?